The secret to crystal clear aquariums is actually no secret at all. If you're struggling to maintain crystal clear water quality, then you need to rethink your filtration. In today's video, I'm going to go over the 4 main types of filters and then cover a couple other things that can impact your water clarity. What up, fish friends? Hope you're having a great day. My name is Michael, owner of many fish tanks and an aquarium cleaning company. Needless to say, my specialty is water clarity. Okay, let's start off with the hang-on back filter. The hang-on back filter, cunningly named, just sits on the back of the tank. It sucks water in through this intake and spits it out after running it through some filter media. I think this is a great filter for a lot of folks because they're cheap, they're easy to find, they're really easy to clean out. If you're setting up your first aquarium, or maybe you have 100 aquariums and you don't want to spend a ton of money on filtration for each one, then this is a really good option to go with. Now, there are a few different types of hang-on back filters. There's actually hundreds of different types, but there's a few basic layouts for the hang-on backs. And really what it boils down to is what kind of filter media can you stick in the hang-on back. A really good hang-on back filter will be kind of boxier shaped, so you can kind of put in your own media. Or a lower quality one, in my opinion, is just going to have a very narrow space for you to put in these little filter cartridges that they come with. And this is the biggest downside, in my opinion, to using a hang-on back of this type, is that you're locked into buying all these silly little filter cartridges, which even though you think you're saving money by buying a cheap filter, can quickly add up over the course of a year. You may as well buy a more expensive canister filter. So your better option is to buy one of these boxier hang-on back filters. Aqua Clear, Tidal, those are a couple brands that come to mind initially. I'll leave some links in the description with some other ones if I can find them. But the reason that they're so good is because you can stick a full brick of sponge in there and then some filter media like ceramic rings or lava rock. And then if you wanted, you could also put in some carbon in there. And so doing it this way, you never have to change out the ceramic rings or the sponge. You can just wring them out. And this brick of sponge will actually be able to trap a lot more particles than that little filter cartridge. Some other pros and cons to the hang-on back. I mentioned before, it's really easy to clean, takes about 30 seconds. So when it comes to cons with the hang-on back, one of my biggest problems is it's difficult to adjust the flow. So some other types of filters, you can really dictate where exactly the flow is going, and then it's going to pick up all the sediment and you can kind of prevent those buildup areas. With the hang-on back filter, it's going to kind of flow where it wants to flow, and it's really just going to create kind of a circular pattern right in front of where it's filtering. That's not going to ruin your tank though. You might just have to get into a couple corners where detritus builds up and siphon it out during your routine water changes. Next type of filter is my absolute favorite, the canister filter. So canisters are the most effective way of filtering a fish tank, in my opinion. The way a canister filter works is it's basically a bucket with a lid, a very fancy, expensive bucket, but it's got a motor in there, and then it makes the water flow through whatever chambers are in that filter. Usually you're going to have sponge and then some sort of biological media, ceramic rings or lava rock, what I like to use. And so you're going to be getting 2 types of filtration, mechanical and biological. When I say mechanical, all I mean is we're picking up all the particles in water. Debo, come on down, bud. Okay, you can join me. Hi, Debo. We got Debo here. He's going to be helping me the rest of the video until he gets bored. You can control the outflows, and so what I like to do is get a circular pattern going with the canister filters. You always have the intake on one side and the outtake right next to it. That way you create a flow. If you have one on one side and one on the other, then you're basically creating dead spots in between. It's really good to stick them together and create that circular pattern. And so, obviously, I mentioned the pros, very good at cleaning. Another thing is that some of them come with built in heaters. So, if you don't like the aesthetic of a heater in the tank, you can have it in the filter. Cons, they are more expensive and they do take a little longer to maintain. You know, a really good canister filter for a tank this size costs about 250 bucks, whereas a hang on bag for a tank this size probably costs about 50 bucks. So we're talking a 5 times increase. Another con is that they do take longer to clean. So if you don't like getting your hands dirty, then maybe not the best type of filter to clean out. There are more tedious canister filters to clean out. So if that's something on your mind, consider the Awaze Biomaster. It's got this ring of sponges that's separate to the main canister compartment. So all you got to do is pull this ring of sponges out and quickly rinse them off. It only takes a few minutes. Most other canister filters, you'll need to open up the whole canister and get in there, pull all these media trays out and clean them out, which can get a little bit messy and time consuming. But as someone who does this for a living, it's really not that bad. You just got to do it. I think the biggest catch for people is that they don't like getting their hands dirty, which they certainly will when you're cleaning one of these canisters out. You can find tons of different types of canister filters at your local fish store or your online retailers. But my favorite one, like I mentioned, is the Awaze Biomaster. Another great one is the Penplax Cascade. There's also many, many other types if you want to try, but buyer beware. If you get a really cheap canister filter, it's possible that the connector units won't work that well and you might get some leaking eventually. The next type of filtration is a sump. It's not one that I really come across very often. Sumps are great for really large tanks because they're cost efficient. I'm not saying that they're really cheap, but they do a good job filtering at a moderate price. So big tanks like this usually have some sort of overflow built into it, and then you can just modify the sump however you want. It's just this box or fish tank that sits underneath the tank, and it's got a bunch of chambers built into it with usually some sort of mechanical and biological filter media. So here we have some sponge or filter floss chambers, and then there's an area for these bio balls that harbor beneficial bacteria, and then some more sponge as it flows through these filters, and then pumps. They pump the water back up into the tank. Now the sump is great because it can filter tons and tons of water. The volume that this is able to handle is incredible. Compared to canister filters, they're a lot more affordable. We'd probably be looking at 3 or 4 decent sized canister filters on a monster tank, whereas one sump could handle it. Another pro is that you can fit in whatever kind of filter media you want inside of this sump. You can put in biological, chemical, mechanical. It does it all really well. Now, the downsides to a sump is that they're kind of hard to clean out. It's not like it's going to take you an hour to clean this sump out. It probably took me about 10 minutes, which is a little bit longer than a canister filter. But you just got to go through here, bring out the filter floss, sponges, media, that sort of stuff. And then you got to get in there and siphon out the corners because there are areas where it builds up. I would say this sump was not built well because it's very difficult to access the bottom layers and it's virtually impossible to completely clean it out. For sumps that I've built in the past, unfortunately, I don't have footage of them anymore, but I built all the chambers open top so that you can get in there and clean stuff out. That really is the way that they should all be built. Another con to using sumps is that they always seem to leak. It's not a matter of if, just when. Okay, last and probably least is the under gravel filter. This guy used to be the go-to filter when I was a kid. That's all you saw under gravel filters. Under gravels are fairly effective, but they're definitely not the best as far as I'm concerned. And the way they work is there's a plastic grate that sits at the bottom of your tank, and then there's some tubes that go up on both sides. Back when I was a kid, you usually just put air bubbles in the tubes, and the air bubbles would pull water up. And as they pull water up, it pushes water down onto the gravel. And that's where all of the like detritus and debris gets sucked into the gravel. And then you just have to gravel vac whenever you do your water changes to get rid of all that gunk. Look in this bucket, there's tons of stuff that I've pulled up from just a couple minutes of gravel vacuuming. Very easy to maintain an under gravel filter. So some cool new upgrades that people do today is they stick a power head on top of the under gravel tube rather than like the air stones, because you can push a lot more volume and handle a heavier bio load that way. Pros to the under gravel filter is that they are affordable, they're easy to clean, but the cons are that they don't do a terrific job of pumping water around the tank unless you're using the power head unit. And then also, if you're doing a planted tank, the plants are rooting into that gravel and then you can't get in there and clean. The under gravel filter definitely has a time and a place. It's great for like this daycare where I clean, where they're not doing complicated setups. They got a bunch of little tanks spread throughout the facility, and these tanks probably go back to the early 2000s, if I'm guessing. So they are a bit dated, but the filters work just fine. The fish seem happy enough. You know, the under gravel is a great option. Also, if you're running a store or a garage fish room where you got tons and tons of tanks, you can basically drill out the bottom of each tank and have some sort of like valve there where you drain water that way and then you fill them up. It's like the closest way you can automate water changes on a large scale for multiple fish tanks. The age old question, how often do you need to clean your filter out? Usually between 2 and 4 weeks is kind of that magic number that most people fall in. Granted, if you have a small filter and tons of fish in your tank, maybe once a week. If you have a big filter and very few fish, maybe once a month, every other month. I know some people will tell me, oh, I clean my filter out every 6 months because I'm worried about destroying the beneficial bacteria in the filter. And that is definitely a myth in the fish keeping world. Cleaning the sponges out is not going to destroy all of the beneficial bacteria in your tank. Sure, some of them live in that sponge, but the whole point of that sponge is to trap debris. If you're not clearing that sponge, then it can't trap more debris. If your filter is running slower than normal, you can be sure that you've waited too long to clean your filter out. There can be some really bad things that happen waiting too long. For one, canister filters, if the sponges get too clogged, they can start to draw air through the gasket. For a hang on back filter, if they get clogged, then water can start to flow outside the filter, even leaking on the floor. Same thing with the sump. If it gets really blocked up, then the water is not going to be able to flow through the chambers properly and it could backflow elsewhere. So make sure you clean your filters out. Everyone's going to be different. So, take it with a grain of salt. You need to learn your system and figure out what that optimal time frame is for you. In my opinion, more often the better if you want that clear water. All right, let's talk about a couple other things that impact water clarity. Stocking. If you overstock your tank, you're going to have a lot harder time achieving water clarity because there's tons of fish pooping up a storm in there. You're also going to have to feed them a lot. You're likely to have like big fish swimming around, kicking stuff up. This tank, for example, gets constantly overfed. There is no amount of cleaning I can do or filtration I can do that will keep up with the amount of food that's being thrown in this tank, especially food that doesn't get eaten. It's just going to sit here and go moldy and look bad and foul up the water quality. It's not great for the fish either. So make sure that you stock your tank right and you feed right if you're concerned with water clarity. Now, the last thing is something that I think is super straightforward and obvious, but a lot of people tend to not pick up on this. Cleaning your glass. It's so easy. Even if you clean your tank once a month, like the filter and other stuff, you can get one of those little magnets and scrape your glass off, and that is going to make a huge difference. Once you're done scraping, then just splash some water on your tank and wipe it down with a towel. No need to use like glass cleaner or anything fancy. Water and a towel will do the job just fine. If you have kids, cats, or dogs, or your tank is in a dentist office or something like that, it's going to get tons of smudges along the front. And no matter how clear your water is, you need to have clear glass to enjoy that. So go ahead and take that extra 30 seconds to make sure your glass is clean. You will not regret it. What are some tips and tricks that you use to maintain ultra clear water quality? Let me know if I missed anything. What's your favorite type of filter? Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, or if you learned anything, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, watch some other content. These are all completely free ways to support my channel. Really appreciate it. Until next time, see ya.